Hello everyone, welcome to this video. Here we're gonna talk about different types of disabilities. Still, we're just gonna go a general overview to understand how they're classified and which ones are the most common and that we have to take a look for. So in the past video, we mentioned that there are different types of disabilities, permanent, temporary, and situational, and someone could have a combination of these three. The difference is how much they how long they stay with us and the reasons behind them. And either of these ones could be related to either of our senses: touch, see, hear, smell, vision, speak, all of them. If someone has any type of disabilities, physical, sensory, or cognitive, these are these main categories of how disabilities are classified. But if someone has any type of physical disabilities, that does not mean that the person can or cannot have a sensory one. So a person can have multiple disabilities of these three different types because they are, and sometimes they might be related or maybe not, and they just appear in someone's lives. So let's talk about some types of permanent disabilities, physical ones. And here, this means the loss of physical capacity results in the person having a reduced ability or inability to perform body movements, such as walking, moving their hands and arms, sitting and standing, as well as controlling their muscles. So here, when talking about physical and mobility, this involves walking, stability, strength to hold, push, carry, and reach. Many of these tasks include the use of more than one of skills concurrently. Physical strength and endurance can also have an impact on the individual's capability to execute motor activities. A physical disability does not necessarily stop you performing specific tasks, but it makes it more challenging. So the fact that someone has a disability does not mean that they cannot do these activities at all, but it just makes it more harder, or it brings pain as they do it. So this includes daily tasks such as taking a longer time to complete, getting dressed, gripping, carrying things. The causes of these could could be varied. They usually fall into one of these categories. It could be congenital, where a person has been born with this condition, or it can develop one because of these inherited genetic problems. It could that could be suffering an injury at birth or later in time, or have issues with the muscles. They could be acquired. Any acquired physical disability could be due to an accident, infection, or disease, or as a side effect of a medical condition of another type. There are two main groups of physical disabilities: musculoskeletal abilities. This musculoskeletal disability affects the joints, bones, and muscles and includes loss of deformity of limbs. Some of these includes muscular dystrophy, osteogenesis imperfecta. These disabilities result in an inability to perform body movements due to deformities, diseases, or degeneration affecting muscles or bones. There are more than 200 musculoskeletal conditions, and each year 20% of people in the United Kingdom see a doctor because of a problem related to it. So it's not something that is too small anymore. Common examples of these disabilities include back and neck pain, osteoarthritis, fractures associated with bone fragility, and inflammatory conditions like rheumatoid arthritis. On the other hand, we have neuromusculoskeletal disability. This is defined as the inability to move affected body parts because of diseases, degeneration, or disorder of the nervous system, resulting in physical disabilities. The conditions that fall under these disabilities are cerebral palsy, spina bifida, stroke, spinal cord injury, head injury, and poliomyelitis. Physical disabilities may affect a person in different terms. In terms of mobility, like walking around, and some people with this condition may have or need mobility aids, and the ones mostly used are crutches or wheelchairs. They might have problems walking or traveling long distances, changing directions, or going up and down, so they require resting spaces, even surfaces or sufficient space, low inclination ramps, and holding accessories. When talking about the effect of strength and endurance, we might think of the strength necessary to walk an inclined pathways, stairs, long distances, and they require frequent resting places. We also have dexterity. It involves mainly the use of hands, pushing, pulling, lifting, twisting, and turning to carry out activities. Some of these may not be able to move one or both hands. Some may have limited strength in their hands to perform activities with precision or accuracy. When I mention precision, it refers to how close measurements are of the same item are to each other. And accuracy refers to how close a measurement is to the true or accepted value. So we're talking about dexterity also in terms of using digital interfaces or physical interfaces. This is going to be very important. And the last one is reach. It is greatly dependent on the person's height, length of their arms, the usage of it, and the strength and flexibility of the upper body. They require a comfortable reach range. For daily activities, it is important to find a way that it doesn't require them to stretch or bend from their waist. So we have to be careful about extended reach range that requires someone to stretch or bend too much. And this should be left to perform activities that do not require precision or are not frequent. So when thinking about how we organize a kitchen, for for them we have to find a way of having the most common items in a comfortable reach range so that people in daily activities in daily household activities they do not have to stretch or bend too much or not at all from their waist, and then just put the items that are used once in a while, once every 6 months, in this extended reach range, so it doesn't affect the person's daily activities. And the last one is the balance, the control of the limbs, like hands and walking. So for them, we want to add some elements to hold on. The other category is the sensory disabilities. People with sensory disabilities may feel sensory input more or less intensely than other people, which impacts on a person's ability to interact in different environments and perform daily activities. As a result, sensory disabilities may affect access to visual and or auditory information. Most content information is presented visually or auditorily in the classroom. For example, for this class, if a person is not able to see, then most of the classes would be left apart because the person would not be able to see these slides, hindering, therefore, their educational experience. For people with sensory difficulties, there are three main components: sensory modulation. This affects the ability of turning sensory messages into controlled behavior that matches the nature and intensity of the sensory information. For example, overreactions to touch, movement, sounds, odors, and taste can cause discomfort, avoidance, getting distracted, and anxiety. Then we have sensory based motor. This affects the ability of stabilizing, moving, or planning a series of movements in response to sensory demands. For example, deficits in balance and gross motor, and fine motor coordination, and the ability to perform skilled, familiar, and/or novel motor actions. And last, we have sensory discrimination. This affects the ability of sensing similarities and differences between sensations. For example, incorrect processing of visual or auditory input, inattentiveness, disorganization, or poor school performance. These sensory disabilities can be a person can have one or more. Uh, when talking about dual sensory impairment, we talk about the combination of both hearing and sight impairment. It is not necessarily a total loss of these two senses. Indeed, the majority of dual sensory impaired people have some degree of sight and or hearing. The combination of these two sensory impairments intensify the impact of each other, which usually means that a deaf-blind person will have difficulty or find it even impossible to utilize or benefit fully from services from deaf people or services of blind people. When talking about sensory disabilities, the most common that we might know are vision and hearing disabilities. Vision enables a person to be responsive to the luminance of surfaces, objects, shapes, size, and colors. These impairments, therefore, defines a degree of restriction. It could be a slight loss or even total blindness. It involves also color blindness and night blindness, recognizing faces, reading, etc. A person with this impairment may have difficulty functioning in public spaces, making them feel insecure and unsafe when navigating. A complete loss of vision causes difficulty in mobility and everyday tasks. The causes of this can range from a genetic or age related degeneration, injury, or affection, or even an illness such as cataracts, diabetes, retinitis pigmentosa, glaucoma, or detached retina. So these people need information, signifiers, and accessories that engage other senses to give them enough information to go through the world. Then we have the loss of hearing. Hearing is the ability to catch the sound, determine its direction, volume, source, frequency, and to separate different sounds. People with hearing disabilities can find it challenging to communicate, navigate, and gather information to identify potential hazards such as traffic. They can cause learning and speech difficulties in young children, and this can be supported through therapy. Age related hearing loss is the largest cause of hearing loss in many places. This might be due to the cell degeneration or to exposure to loud noises or illness over lifetime. Some use hearing implants to be able to hear better, which is still a stigma in our society, or even sign language to communicate. So, if we want to make a better world for people with hearing disabilities, that we need to have in mind that they require textual and visual accompaniment, being able to touch or understand sounds through vibrations, or to shapes, through textures. To prevent this condition, if whether it is caused with, throughout our lives, is to reduce the loud environments, city noise, use of hearing protection, and listening to music at correct decibels. Now let's talk about speech disability. These are related to communication disorders. Speech is a complex process that requires precise timing, nerve, and muscle control. In most cases, the cause for this is unknown. However, there are many known causes of speech impairments, such as hearing loss, neurological disorders, brain injury, and an increase in mental strength, constant bullying, intellectual disability, substance use disorder, and physical impairments such as cleft lip and palate and vocal abuse or misuse. A person who suffers from a stroke, an accident, or birth defect may also have speech and language problems. So if we want to design for solutions for people with speech disabilities, we have to keep in mind that they require multiple resources or methods of communications. So we can have a voice, we can have chat for online classes, we can make signs. These are different ways to find a balance and make it easier for them. Now let's talk about touch disabilities, which may be not as common for us as the other ones. The tactile experience brings us closer to space, object, and people around us. It helps us understand and get a deeper appreciation of it. It can be a dominant tool to navigate or perform activities when other senses are not working fully. Experience of touch consists in three types of receptors simulating the skin: pressure, pain, and temperature. As one ages, these receptors tend to diminish, leading to changes in the capacity to perceive various information through touch. So, if we are designing for people with disabilities related to touch, it is important to add information of textures or possible hazards. For example, warning, hard, or what texture you're feeling, or whether something is sharp. And at last but not least, we have taste and smell. The most common smell and taste disorders is called anosmia. This is the loss of sense of smell. And also we have ageusia. This is a loss of sense of taste. Hyposmia is a reduced ability to smell, and hypogeusia is the reduced ability to taste sweet, sour, bitter, or salty things. In other disorders, odor, taste, or flavors, they can be misread and distorted. They may cause you to detect a bad odor or taste from someone that is normally pleasant. These disorders can affect the quality of life because you don't enjoy things the way that they should or the way that others do. But they may also be a sign of an underlying disease. Some people are born with these disorders, but most can be caused by an illness, head injury, hormone changes, mouth problems, or even, as we went through, having COVID. The possible dangers of this is not detecting things like fire, leaking gas, spoiled food, poisonous fumes, and they can also affect nutrition. Now let's talk about cognitive disabilities. This is the third type of permanent disabilities, and this affects the way that someone receives, understands, perceives, and processes information. A significantly reduced ability to understand this newly or complex information and also to learn and apply new skills. For example, these limitations will cause a child to learn and develop more slowly than neurotypical child. Children with intellectual disabilities may take longer to learn how to speak, walk, or take care of their personal needs such as dressing or eating. Learning and social skills can also be affected because of these. It is very important to understand that cognitive disabilities are not a disease or illness. In many cases, there is no cure. That's why it is not considered a disease. Although there is no cure for it, it can be diminished through therapy or different learning strategies. Doctors have found many causes of intellectual disabilities. The most common are genetic conditions. Sometimes an intellectual disability is caused by abnormal genes inherited from parents, errors when genes combine, or some other reasons. An example of these is Down syndrome, Fragile X syndrome. There can also have been problems during pregnancy. Intellectual disabilities can result when the baby does not develop inside the mother properly. For example, there may be a problem with the way that the baby cells divide as it grows. A woman who drinks alcohol or gets an infection, right, like rubella, during the pregnancy may also have a baby with intellectual disabilities. There could be problems at birth. If a baby has problems during labor or birth, such as not getting enough oxygen, they may have these intellectual disabilities. Or it could also be related to health problems. Diseases like whooping cough, measles, or meningitis can cause intellectual disabilities. These can also be caused by extreme malnutrition, which is not eating properly, not getting enough medical care, or being exposed to poisons like lead or mercury. The diagnosis on this is could be complicated and many times not accepted by parents because of the stigma around it. To diagnose any intellectual disabilities, professionals look at the person's mental abilities, such as the IQ, and their adaptive skills, the ability of a person's brain to learn, think, solve problems, and make sense of the world, and whether the person has the skills they need to live independently. This is called adaptive behavior or adaptive functioning. The skills related to adaptive behavior are daily living skills such as getting dressed, going to the bathroom, feeding oneself, communication skills such as understanding what is said and being able to answer, and social skills with peers, family members, adults, and others. Let's talk about some examples of cognitive disabilities. First, we have the aphasia. Aphasia is the difficulty of speaking, finding the words, writing on, or understanding the language. We have autism, where people have difficulty understanding some communication or social interaction. And autism can is a very wide condition, and that's why it's called spectrum of autism, because every person has such different conditions or situations, their senses, the way they understand for each person is very different. That is why people that fall within this spectrum have to be understood individually by oneself. There are some common traits and common aspects that all of them have, but each person is a different world. That's why if we design something or are working with people with autism, the challenge is even bigger. Then we have attention deficit disorder or ADD, which is focusing and keeping attention on a task can be very hard. Dyslexia is the difficulty of recognizing letters and words, and dyscalculia is the trouble recognizing numbers and symbols or doing simple math. Diagnosing and accepting any of these conditions, as I mentioned before, can be very hard. There are many people that have some degree of cognitive disabilities that are not diagnosed, in a big part because parents and families do not want to accept it, or maybe because they are not um, they are not diagnosed or identified. In most societies, a lot of doctors, a lot of medicals, a lot of teachers that are meant to identify them, many times they fail to identify and to bring them into treatment. And because of the stereotype, the stigma, and the negative reactions towards this and toward people with these disabilities, they fail to be diagnosed and therefore treated. And this may cause several problems in not understanding the condition of someone, may result in just saying that the person is just has a bad conduct, a bad attitude, is disrespectful, that the person even is dumb or crazy. That's why it's very important to understand and go to professionals and be open to them. Usually, when we think about people with cognitive disabilities, we think about these very hard cases and extreme cases. And we would normally not think of us as people with any type of cognitive disorder. But let's think about for a moment. Have you ever had one of these problems? Focusing on a current task, or focusing on this video, processing simple information, retaining information for short periods of time, storing and recalling information much later, reasoning, prioritizing, and planning, understanding written or spoken language, recognizing numbers and symbols, understanding and calculating very simple math. Have you ever had any of these problems? Well, does that mean that you have a cognitive disability? Maybe, maybe not. All of us probably have like one of these to a certain level. Probably all of us suffer or have had a situation with these problems. And how do we understand if this is actually a disability or not? Well, as we mentioned before, disability, when we think about it in with our focus, is not only about the impairment, it's about the mismatch of the interaction. We see it in defining as a disability if it's limiting or hindering the performance of an activity in a manner that is considered normal. If it is affecting my life, if it is not affecting my life in a significant way, then we probably do not categorize them as a disability. So the main takeaways that I want you to have from these couple of videos are that, first of all, that we have similar challenges as those faced by people with disabilities. We just may have different intensities, but we all have similar challenges like opening the door at any point of our life. Taking special needs into account means paying more attention to common needs. Things that, like opening the door, like walking around, like going up the stairs, are common needs, but paying more attention to them and who might have the most problem with it, that could be considered a special needs. And we all benefit from this concept or aspiration of designing for all. Universal design is not special design. It's about good design. It's about designing in a good way. So universal design, I want you to think about it this way. It is necessary for some because some people right now are excluded because of the way that the world is designed. It is good for many in people that have difficulties at some moment, and that could be us. And that is just comfortable for everyone. Let's think again about the automatic sliding doors, which is necessary for people in wheelchair. It is good for those who are carrying bags or that have broken arms, but it's just comfortable for everyone. We all like automatic doors, automatic stairs. It's just comfortable for everyone. So as we are designing for extreme cases, we are designing for everyone. And that is the mindset that I hope you get from this class and this session and this video. When we are designing for extreme cases, for disabilities, these 10% of the population that is usually not taken into account, we are designing for the 100%.